All right, as people are joining us, we have people joining. We're going to wait a few more minutes before we get started. Know that there's been some problems with the links. My name is Lisa McCarley. We're very honored that you would join us today on World Elder Abuse Awareness Today. If you've been following any of us, speakers and presenters, you'll know that we are very concerned about the relationship of the local probate, equity, family courts to elder abuse and what we believe is a failure to prevent and to mitigate elder abuse. Our presentation is about who is aiding and abetting elder abuse, and we will make the argument that our broken American legal system contributes to the suffering of elders, and we have ways. We are talking about methods of fixing that, mitigating it, and hopefully preventing elder abuse as we see it being, shall we say, aided and abetted by our local probate court system. I do have a PowerPoint to share with you. Please forgive me. I'm not particularly adept at technology, but are we ready to go, panelists?
Yes.
Yep.
All set.
We are all set.
So welcome to our presentation on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Who is aiding and abetting elder abuse? We believe the answer will surprise you. We do believe that there are policies and procedures that are taking place in our local court system that is failing us and causing needless trauma, exploitation, and abuse. My name is Lisa McCarley. And I'm sorry, I'm definitely having a little bit of problem with my PowerPoint. I went to Loyola Law School. I'm a little different than many attorneys. I wanted to be a probate and conservatorship attorney. I was mentored to be that, and I envisioned a career helping families dealing with the heartbreaking circumstances of senility and disability. Over the course of my 30-year career, 30 years ago this month, I became a California licensed attorney. I've represented hundreds of people in every type of capacity. I've represented families with dynasty wealth. I've represented people that are Medi-Cal, the poorest of the poor. It has been my great honor to be of assistance to the local Los Angeles, Southern California communities. About 5 or 6 years ago, I began to recognize that there were policies and procedures within the court system itself that undermines the proper functions of these probate courts, which is to protect the elderly and to protect the disabled. Instead, what I found is that people that were untoward towards these populations were the ones that were, in a sense, winning in probate court. As a result of, let's say in 2019, I heard the call, I made a commitment because of 2 cases that I was involved with, both coincidentally or not, of involving women named Betty. I heard a call, I started becoming proactive. I went to Sacramento, I started lobbying. I spent huge amounts of time, my own money, trying to find ways to protect the community that I was in love with and wanted to take care of. COVID shut that down. Like many people, I became very depressed and despondent. And I got a call from a young man named Kevin who said, would you be willing to come to a Free Britney rally? And I said, yeah, sure. I've got nothing to do. It's COVID. For some reason, I went. While I was there, some young people handed me some documents and said, would you take a look at this since you've had all this experience as a conservatorship attorney? I did take a look at the documents, and what I found was astonishing. And that is really what I believe to be the beginning of the Free Britney movement, where it was completely legitimate. These young people had used love and intuition and just plain common sense, and they knew that there was something wrong with the Britney Spears conservatorship. So there's me at a rally, and that's a poster of Britney, but I'm giving you my favorite smirk because I was on the side of right and righteousness. I loved being a part, or actually I call it supporting that movement. I couldn't call myself a Britney Spears fan. That would be unfair to my true love, Madonna, but I knew that they were right, and I wanted to do everything I could to support them. I know that it's World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, but I want to give you an idea of what happened to Britney, because I can promise you these policies and practices are still going on today. And that is why I'm here, and that is why the other speakers are here, because we want you to know that there is something wrong with this system. So what I'm going to do right now, with a little luck, is I'm going to show you, if I'm get some feedback from my presenters. Do you see a document that was filed in February 2008? Has everyone seen that?
No, no,
Now are you seeing that?
no,
No.
no.
Oh, hold on, because I am trying to do screen sharing. Are you seeing anything, the Britney Spears document?
Nope.
No.
No, ma'am. Oh,
There we go.
yes,
There we go.
There we
yes.
go.
Now we see it.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry. Okay. As I said, bear with me. I was born in the 60s, but I'm still considered a boomer. So this is all very challenging. I didn't grow up with it. Well, the important thing, now that you see it, is that there are attorneys that were representing Jamie Spears. And these are very sophisticated attorneys. The two Jerrys, as the Free Britney people call them, Vivian Thoreen, had created, this is a caption, this is a document that they created. And this purports to be a document that represents what happened. You'll see the date, February 4th, 2008. And that is what I would consider to be the beginning of Britney Spears' unlawful and awful conservatorship. And I know we're here to talk about elder abuse. Hang in there with me. There is a connection to what happened to Britney. So they go through in this court order all of the appearances, names. These are all names that are, you can ask me for a copy of this document, you can find it. But what I found most interesting and really staggering was that they wrote and documented that as a result of the pleadings that would be filed, those are the documents prepared by the attorneys that are writing this court order, the declaration by J. Edward Spar, MD, and the report of PVP counsel, and PVP back in those days actually stood for Probate Volunteer Panel. And very misleading. That used to be a way that people thought that their attorney was volunteering. No, only being on the panel was voluntary. Everything else was very much a paid gig. So we have an attorney, Mr. Ingham. The court finds, as a result of this declaration, that Ms. Spears does not have the capacity to retain counsel, and she lacked the capacity to retain Adam F. Streisand as her counsel. And they wrote this even though, in fact, Britney had retained Adam Streisand as her counsel. There was no question that she had called him and asked him to represent her, but they are telling the world through this court order that Dr. Spar basically did an evaluation, signed a declaration, and now Britney can't have counsel. According to Dr. Spar's declaration on line 27, I'm trying to see if my arrow, according to this declaration, Ms. Spears does not have the ability to attend the hearing. Mr. Ingham indicated in his report that Ms. Spears was given an opportunity through him to communicate to the court, and she elected not to. So basically a conversation where Mr. Ingham walked into her hospital room, said, Britney Spears, I'm Sam Ingham, I'm your PVP counsel, I'm here to represent you. And Britney said, no, thanks. I hired Adam Streisand, what I imagine happened, but this is how they construct that conversation, that she chose not to speak through Mr. Ingham. And then on the basis of Dr. Spar's declaration and Mr. Ingham's report, the court should waive Ms. Spears' presence at the hearing. Well, there is a major problem that I had with that, which is simply that there was no Dr. Spar report. Never
Right.
was. And so a few years years later, during the height of the Free Britney movement, and again, please excuse this transition, it's going to be a little rough. I actually saw a interview with Dr. Spar. So let's hear how Dr. Spar responds to being asked about this report. Now, can you see Dr. Spar?
Yes,
All
yes.
right, thank you. All right, here we go. Dr. Spar is now being confronted and asked about his representation. Now, I kind of put together how curious it is that backup dancers associated with Britney Spears and her tour had to sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, to talk about, so that they would not talk about Britney, her situation, the condition of her life, but not Dr. Spar. I mean, that's a fabulous declaration that they have pretended that they have. So let's just hear what Dr. Spar, about 1 minute, bear with me.
You know, I'm not a fan. I don't listen to music of that ilk, but yeah, I know who she is. Wait, before I met her?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I'm not going to acknowledge that I've ever met her.
Do you specialize in dementia?
Well, I'm a geriatric psychiatrist, so that's one of the things geriatric psychiatrists spend a lot of time and energy on, yeah.
Is that why you were brought in to evaluate Britney Spears?
I'm not going to verify that I was ever brought in to evaluate Britney Spears.
So here is a court document said, according to Dr. Spar's declaration.
Okay, again, show me my signed declaration. If you show me a public document with my signature on it, I will verify my signature. Other than that, I'm not going to talk about whether anybody ever retained me to see anybody, not just Britney Spears. These are all confidential evaluations.
Wow. Wow, you tell me that the Free Britney movement, people weren't right. And that's not even the end of it. I mean, that's not even the biggest problem. For me, the biggest problem, and again, pardon my mess, is that in spite of what Mr. Ingham did, and in spite of the fact that there was new legislation promulgated to stop people from being forced to have court-appointed counsel, to stop the activities that took place that traumatized, exploited, and abused Britney Spears, one would think that the courts would get together and say, maybe he shouldn't be an attorney. And now, by the way, just want to show you, he actually read this order, Mr. Ingham, and he approved it as to form and content, knowing full well that there was not a Dr. Spar report. But does that stop our Los Angeles County probate courts from having Mr. Ingham be a court-appointed attorney? No, there is no stopping this broken system. And this is what I think is bringing down not only the probate courts, but apparently the family law courts. Here's a declaration or report that Mr. Ingham made and was submitted in April 2022. After Britney has another attorney, there's still, and after she made actually her remarkable statement that she didn't know she could have a counsel of her own choice. She didn't know that she could get a termination of the conservatorship without an evaluation. Mr. Ingham is still a court-appointed attorney for another very wealthy, I wouldn't say quite as famous, but Elizabeth Kane is a wealthy, wealthy widow who was the widow, I believe, of the gentleman that created the Batman or Spider-Man series,
Oh, yeah.
right? One of those Marvel comics. Nothing stops these people. Once they're court-appointed counsel, and especially once they're one of the favorites of the universe, like Mr. Ingham was, there's no accountability. There's no supervision. There's no training that goes on. And ironically, it was Mr. Ingham that used to train other people to be court-appointed counsel in what would probably be the only truly intelligent move that I've made in my career. I actually decided not to ever be court-appointed counsel because of shenanigans like this. And this is affecting so many cases. It would take me weeks, if not months, or maybe a year, if I did a case every day to tell you what is going on to this very minute in Los Angeles County Superior Court. These people are still writing their little ridiculous reports. And I'm going to give you one more example to really nail down that it is this untoward relationship with judges and these attorneys, and who is in control of the courtroom. It is the court-appointed counsel. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint, begging your forgiveness. All right, so judges running court legal services programs, not a good idea. In 2008 or so, he was also Casey Kasem's attorney. You'll hear from Kerry Kasem in a few minutes. Mr. Ingham, still a court-appointed counsel. Now I'm going to show you this terrible slide. The court-appointed counsel named Nolan Milburn went to do a investigation of a report of elder abuse or abuse against poor Michael Precio. Yes, this is a very upsetting photograph. Not nearly as upsetting to as what ends up happening to Michael. Mr. Nolan Milburn interviews the people that are doing this to Michael and finds them to be so charming that he actually writes in his report, the limited co-conservators were told by healthcare providers to use handcuffs to restrain him. And then he goes on to explain that the reports of abuse are not necessary. It's not necessary to follow up. Nobody from Los Angeles Superior Court bothered to ever contact the brother who was reporting this abuse. There was even an article that was written by one of my colleagues named Tom Coleman, who said, who's going to help Mikey? Michael, the man in this photograph, ends up dying. He ends up being killed through poisoning. He's poisoned to death by his parents and dies within 90 days of the photograph being taken. And my point being that Nolan Milburn was still a court-appointed counsel for someone, a case of one of my Bettys that broke my heart. And that was why I was here today. But there was no one to report to. I tried to bring these photographs to court and said, Commissioner Nord, you need to know how poor an investigation has been done in this case. He refused to listen. It is the court-appointed attorneys that are telling the judges what to do. And these people have no accountability or training whatsoever. Is there a question so far? No. So
No.
at this point, that is who is aiding and abetting these abusers, these incompetent investigations by attorneys who are supposed to be advocates, or who is supposed to understand due process, or supposed to understand even just what elder abuse is. This is our problem. With that, I'd like to turn over the presentation to one of my dear friends and a true activist and one of the warmest and most, I don't know, unbelievably caring people I've met. Phyllis Kalbach wants to tell you about her experience as well.
Thank you. So, who is going to take care of us when we can no longer take care of ourselves? Who is going to take care of our children when they become elderly? Our parents when they become frail? When I was growing up, my grandmother lived with us until she died. She took care of us, we took care of her. Our town was scattered with these family units, but our society has changed. Today, people are living decades longer, and they have accumulated some form of wealth. Well-organized predators are targeting this wealth, and our country is not prepared. Fleecing the elderly, the vulnerable, and their families is big business. Our vulnerable citizens are being hunted, targeted, isolated, and robbed with little or no interference from authorities. Losses are estimated into the billions of dollars. So let's look a little deeper. This is our story. This is your story. This is a story of our culture and our society as it is right now. My father was a decorated combat veteran of World War II and Korea. He earned the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star. He was diagnosed by the Veterans Hospital to have severe dementia. He had strokes, was blind in one eye, and could barely hear. My brother, sister, and I worked together to take care of our father, but we needed help, and none was available. A family of grifters and later court-appointed attorneys took him away from his home and family in California to Tennessee. One of the grifters actually told me, "Phyllis, you don't understand. I'm taking everything he's got, everything, and there's nothing you can do about it." She was right. They robbed him of everything he owned, then left him penniless in the street to die. He was 95 years old. He is buried in Tennessee, even though he paid for a grave site next to my deceased mother out here in California. My family contacted social services, the police, healthcare facilities, the media. Each told us that this is not their responsibility. Each agency told us to go to the lawyers and to the courts. But the legal system wanted money, and what they wanted was never enough. So no one came to help us. We were alone. We soon found out that this is happening to families all across our country. The process is almost the same in all cases. So let's take a look at how this occurs. Sometimes work and life take adult children far away from our parents, even though there are still emotional connections and those connections remain strong. But no worries, mom and dad are healthy and able to take care of themselves. In fact, older people do prefer to live in their own home. These familiar surroundings provide a sense of safety and comfort. However, when friends and relatives we have known for years have moved away or passed on, loneliness and depression may occur. This makes us vulnerable. The normal aging process brings subtle changes in physical and/or cognitive abilities, which can be more or less severe. This makes us vulnerable, and the predators are watching. Our parents are used to being independent and taking care of themselves and their children, but now they will have to rely on their children to take care of them. This can be a strange situation for both parent and child. Tension between siblings and parents may increase when a parent begins to need some level of caregiving. This can result in actually pushing away helpful family members. A caring family may be shunned while predators, who may be strangers, are suddenly welcomed. The parent is assured by these predators that they are strong enough to take care of themselves and that their greedy family just wants to control them. Our parent feels comforted by these strangers, and they are then adopted as trusted allies against their children. These new friends are now family. Now, everything is done behind closed doors and in secret. A carefully chosen league of professional opportunists, caregivers, lawyers, fiduciaries, and yes, even judges take control, but lack the empathy to place the care of the vulnerable or their families in the equation. Past conflicts and misunderstandings within the family units are used as an excuse to isolate the victim and keep control. Well-meaning caring families are deemed the problem. Conservatorships or guardianships are formed. Wills are rewritten. Trusts are destroyed. Bank accounts are transferred. Property is sold or transferred. Court cases are rubber stamped by friendly court colleagues. The victim's assets disappear into the pockets of the predators, and the victim is discarded. The family's cries for help are ignored by the agencies developed to help them. Thus, criminals act with impunity as abuse reports are passed from one agency to another, with each agency denying responsibility, reiterating what they cannot do while no action is taken. Innocent families are left wounded, manipulated, and too often bankrupt, trying to pay lawyers to protect their family members from predators. We can and must create a new system of care instead of the accepted fleecing of our most vulnerable citizens, or everyone you know and love may become a victim. No one will come to help you to fight. Please, let us work together to create a new system for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. I'm just going to repeat and confirm a couple of things that you said.
Sure.
Am I right that you and your siblings came together and
Yes.
asked a probate court judge to impose a conservatorship or other protective proceedings for your father? At what age?
He was in his 90s, close to 90. Yeah. Yeah. He
And it
needed
was-
help.
Right. And it was your understanding that he had cognitive impairment. Did you feel that that was a fairly obvious impairment? In other words,
Yes. You talked to him for 5 minutes. Yes.
and
Yes.
did he have a court-appointed attorney?
Yes. Yes.
And what did the
Yes.
court-appointed attorney do? What did he or she say?
She said that she analyzed him herself, even though the veterans geriatric doctors had all diagnosed him with dementia, severe dementia, and said he needed help. She said she analyzed him, and according to her analysis, there was absolutely no sign of dementia whatsoever. And he wanted to sign his house over to her. And he wanted to go to Tennessee, where he had never been in his entire life, where he didn't know anybody, but he was totally capable of doing that.
And
Yes.
as between the family that
Mhm.
loved him,
Mhm.
adult children, and the
Mhm.
court-appointed attorney, who did the judge listen to?
The court-appointed attorney, obviously, not us. We weren't even we were nothing. We weren't even, I mean, the court sent someone out to interview him, and we wanted to talk to them. They wouldn't even talk to us, would not even talk to us.
And again, just tell the audience one more, how did that work out for your dad? Just let's pretend that a judge is listening and you have a chance to tell one of the judicial officers how this system is working out. How'd your dad fare at the end of this?
Yes, they put him out in the street in Tennessee. He fell down, he was injured. They picked him up. No one knew who he was. We finally found it. We were looking for him. He just simply disappeared. And when we found him, one of my brother's friends actually managed to locate him, and he was on the phone and he was crying. And he said, I want to come home. I want to come home. Are my kids there? Are my kids there? I want to talk to my kids. I want to come home. He was crying. And we were getting ready. My sister and my brother were getting ready to go to Tennessee because I was ill at the time. And my husband was very ill at the time. And so they were getting ready to go out there, and then he died and they buried him in Tennessee.
Phyllis, I'm so sorry. I want you to know this is a story I hear all the time.
I know.
What I don't understand is why the judges get
Right.
to do this, to make these
Mhm.
decisions, and then they never know the impact. Like Michael Aparicio and Britney Spears, but Michael Aparicio, the slide, nobody cared about the impact of this incompetence and this negligence and this horrible system on
Mhm.
this man. So
May I say one more thing
Yes.
too?
Absolutely.
Because this is extremely important. When he was in Tennessee, he had all kinds of, he was retirements from the school district, retirements from the military, and all kinds of other, they spent all of that and charged it up. So when he died, my family started receiving calls from bill collectors wanting us to pay these bills. And when we asked exactly what did he buy, because when we had him, he had no bills. And they said, well, we can't tell you that, but you're his family, you're responsible for paying these bills.
Right.
I had to put that in because,
It's
oh my.
normal. This is what goes on in court. So we're going to move on because we have a lot to do today. Phyllis, thank you so much for sharing your story. But if you're watching this and you're not familiar with this process, this is not an anomaly. These stories are happening every day. And now I'd like to introduce William Lightfoot. William Lightfoot is a former law enforcement officer, and we're asking the question, like, why doesn't law enforcement help? How can we integrate the law enforcement community with this problem? Bill, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I have spent the last 15 years doing elder abuse investigations, both as a law enforcement officer and in the private sector. And there are two things that I want to bring out basically. Elder abuse is a topic that most people do not hear.
Right.
And in particular, guardianship abuse is something that is not taught to law enforcement in their training. It's not taught to, I'm not sure whether it's taught in many law schools, but there needs to be a change in attitude. Guardianship abuse and elder abuse, period, has to become a priority of both law enforcement, prosecutors, the courts. And it's not the attitude that I use the word attitude, but there has to be a change in behavior of prosecutors and law enforcement when it comes to elder abuse, as in particular guardianship abuse. Most law enforcement officers do not understand and hear very little about guardianship abuse. They don't know what that is.
Right.
When I do training for law enforcement officers in the general topic of elder abuse, it's almost a lost subject, or it had been. It is starting to change in some states, and it has to change in order for us to understand that guardianship abuse is a part of a larger picture.
Right. Exactly. I mean, what most people are told, Bill, is that if you have a guardian or a conservator, then and a problem, it's a civil matter.
Right, and that's one of my next points. Elder abuse and guardianship abuse, the whole topic, has to be taken out of the civil arena and put into the criminal side of the picture. Anything that happens to a senior or to an adult who is 18 to 59 and incapacitated, the underlying causes of that abuse are criminal abuses.
Yep.
They're not civil.
That's right.
And you may find that once you take it out of the civil arena, a lot of the profit goes with it.
Yep.
So
And
can we just kind of explain that? So basically the lawyers DAs, district attorneys, public defenders, they're not being paid by the estate? Is that the point there with the
When
profit?
it's criminal, no.
Mhm.
Now, there are some states where you can have both criminal underlying causes for the abuse, and you can take criminal action for the abuse and also civil. If you live in one of those states, that's fine. You can do both. But the underlying causes of abuse are criminal actions. And to give you an idea, we need to understand exactly what elder abuse is. It includes physical abuse, sexual assault or sexual abuse, coercion, intimidation, emotional and psychological abuse. And I want to just hang there for a minute because there are only 13 states in this country that have laws governing emotional and psychological abuse. And that plays into, that type of abuse plays into undue influence to make a person do something, or to make a senior do something that is not in their best interest.
That's right.
Abandonment, medical fraud, and finally, financial abuse. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but abandonment, I've had cases where caregivers, quote, will take a senior out somewhere and just leave them. You find seniors in bus stops, shopping malls, parks, public parks, and they've just been left. That is a criminal action. That's not civil.
That's right.
When you take a senior, you know, I even had a senior left in all places, the emergency room at a hospital. Seniors are just left to, and when you find these caregivers, they're in another state somewhere. They drop them off and leave them. And I'll give you a real short story. When I was still a police officer, I heard a call come in. It came from a uniform officer on patrol in a very desolate area. It was winter. It was snowing like crazy. It was cold. And while he was patrolling his area, he found an 80-year-old person sitting on a park bench, sitting on a bench in the snow. His caregivers had just left him there and said, "We'll be right back." They took off for North Carolina. Had it not been for that officer, you know, who knows? But elder abuse has to be understood. It has to be,
Yes.
it is a huge topic. And guardianship abuse is a part of that. The other reason, well, financial abuse can include things like the unlawful taking and selling of someone's property. A caregiver will just sell the property for their own use or for their own monetary use. Forcing signatures on legal documents, wills, power of attorneys. They use undue influence to make them sign those documents.
Right. And let me just kind of stop you there. And in my world, if that happens, the zealous advocate appointed by the court will often argue in favor of those documents signed as a result of undue influence, fraud, emotional abuse. I mean, it's almost boring. Now I get the call. I'm not allowed, my dad got married in secret. We didn't even attend the wedding. I'm not allowed to see my dad now, and he changed all of his documents. It's like, how is that not obvious? As
Yeah, when I talk to law enforcement officers, I tell them, look for legal papers and look at the date on the papers.
Mhm.
Mhm.
If that will or trust or legal document is signed and was signed after the person was declared incompetent, something's wrong.
Right.
You can't just stop there and leave it and say, oh, well, I have a document with a signature.
Right.
That's a criminal action. That's not civil. That's forgery.
Mhm.
All of these actions, the underlying actions are criminal actions.
Mhm.
So why can't we use the criminal courts?
Yeah.
Well,
Instead of-
right. And we should be able to, because you would think that, as you said, if the intent is to commit a crime,
Right.
what we
The one-
always hear is that it's a civil matter, especially when there's documents involved. It's very frustrating.
The one other thing I wanted to bring out is that not only should law enforcement, prosecutors, and professionals understand elder abuse, the entire subject of elder abuse, so should citizens. And I do a lot of talks and for seniors groups, for church groups, for groups that are basically formed for seniors. And the reason they need to hear this is because, unfortunately, the collection of evidence to prove abuse, especially financial abuse, has to be done by the caregivers or by their families, because no one else will start collecting evidence enough to prove that they have been financially abused. So a lot of that task of collecting evidence goes to the family or to caregivers.
So, Bill, we so appreciate your coming on and participating. Unfortunately, I've gotten the note that we need to move on. And I do think that the answer, or part of a person, one of our speakers is Diane Diamond. And Diane actually wrote a book about how to deal with abusive guardianships and conservatorships. She's the author of a book that's going to be released later this year, I believe in October of 2023. It's called We're Here to Help When Guardianship Goes Wrong. And Diane, welcome. This is the first time that we've been on a webinar together. And you and I have been corresponding for years.
Yes.
And finally, we haven't met in person, but we finally get to work together as a team. So what would you have to say to advise people besides get your book? So we all need to give us information about how to get a copy of your book. And then what are some of the highlights you'd like to share?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lisa. It's great to meet you like this. And everyone out there should know that your story, your Britney Spears story, is in the book because it was so monumental. Your friend of the court brief was eye-opening, to say the least, and I discuss it fully. Yes, okay, so I'm Diane Diamond. I'm a journalist, investigative reporter, and since 2015, I've been investigating and publishing articles and columns about abusive guardianships and conservatorships. And as Lisa said, my next book is this. I don't know if people can see me, but it's We're Here to Help When Guardianship Goes Wrong. And it really chronicles the double cross that the guardianship and conservatorship system has become. Thus, the cover which I really like a lot. But for purposes of this webinar, we're talking about who is aiding and abetting abusers. I'd like to just summarize a little bit of what I write in the book about who those people are. The ugly fact is that there are bad actors, predators in nearly every step of this process. First of all, I think everybody needs to realize that a guardianship or conservatorship is completely easy to establish. There are people, all you have to do is get a lawyer to write up a petition for guardianship. And some of the instigators are estranged relatives, or an angry business partner, or a former lover, or even a total stranger can start a guardianship. Some of the instigators are the predators. Now, I'll give you an example of that. In Florida, for one, there's so many cases out of Florida because there's so many elderly people there. But there was a real estate agent who had her eye on a piece of beachfront property. The property was it was a motel, and it was owned by an elderly woman. Well, she didn't want to sell, but this real estate agent went to a friendly lawyer friend of hers. They got up a petition for guardianship, and it was approved. Unbelievably, it was approved on the grounds that the elderly woman had sold part of the property at a low price to her beloved nephew. That was all it took. This woman was in guardianship and could not get out.
Right.
Another example, a type of example, is if a senior citizen goes into a hospital emergency room, as has been mentioned here, and they're all alone, they're very likely to meet the acquaintance of what is called a hospital troll. This is a person who will sidle up to the elder and say, "Oh my, you're all alone? Oh my goodness. Well, I'll tell you what, why don't you just sign your name, address, and phone number to this form, and then I can be your advocate." Sounds great, right? Except that form is then sold to a guardianship lawyer or to a guardian, and all of a sudden that person is in guardianship. Sometimes the targeted person and their family has no idea that there's a legal maneuvering going on at all. Here's another one. Guardians and guardianship lawyers often have another kind of network. They're called spotters. And these people work in geriatric doctors' offices, nursing homes, assisted living places, facilities that house people over 55, even senior centers where the lonely people go to play bingo or bridge. Now, these spotters get information on what they call the ripe targets, and then they pass that information. They sell that information to guardians and guardianship attorneys. Now, that elder person will get a phone call and say, "Hey, it's probably time that you come on in and talk to me. We'll talk about updating your will." Or the guardian will make sure they make acquaintance of this elderly person, and they'll say, "You do not want to saddle your children with taking care of you when you're old, now do you?" "No, so let's set up a guardianship for you." That's all it takes. These are not friendly people. These are predators within this system. For the criminally minded, this has become $1 billion racket. I wish I could have called my book The Racket, but that probably would have been a little off-putting. And I noticed that the unscrupulous always defend themselves by saying, "Oh, well, the judge appointed me. I have court protection. The judge has given me permission for every single action I've taken." Well, the reality is these court appointees are not well supervised, if they're supervised at all, and they wield enormous power over the ward.
Thank you,
and
Diane.
all of the family.
Exactly. And it's inexplicable. I wish I had just the time to tell you what a joke some of this training is. I went to a training session once, and it was 3 hours of learning how to fill out the forms to be a court-appointed counsel.
Yeah.
It's astonishing. So thank
Not
you.
about how to help the ward
Right.
or how to relate with the family.
Right.
Yeah.
How to write those stupid reports. I didn't say that.
I hear you. Well, I think too, we need to talk also, and people have here, about the judges. Are they the bad actors? Are they sometimes the predators? Well, yeah. I mean, I'm gonna look at my notes here real quick.
But what's astonishing is, yes, I don't mean to interrupt you, but to my knowledge, for Reva Getz to tell Adam Streisand, I have a secret confidential document here that you're not allowed to see. There have been no repercussions.
Yeah,
And
the judge in the case. Yeah.
I have
yeah.
tried.
And I write about that in the book. Lisa, you're a big part of that chapter, I'll tell you. But you know, to me, it's unbelievable that judges give permission to their court appointees, conservators, guardians, guardian ad litem, whatever, trustees, that they can just overlook a person's last will and testament, their estate documents, their end of life documents. I mean, that to me is just unbelievable.
Their lives. I mean,
And-
their lives. This is like one of the worst cases, Betty case, and Nolan Milburn, the Michael Parisio case. This woman had a loving relationship with her daughters until one day when there was a family feud, and then she never wanted to speak to them again. And the judge accepted that as like being normal, like, oh, okay, that's what happened. I'm like, that would never happen. Never.
Right. And families squabble. Come on. Families they bicker and they disagree. And that doesn't mean that you should take away someone's civil rights and put them under house arrest, literally, with a guardianship or conservatorship. Also, I want to say about judges, I discovered so many things as I wrote this book, you can't believe. But I found that in several states, I found that judges actually went ahead with divorce attorney plans to guardianize the uncooperative wife. She didn't want a divorce, but you know what? The divorce attorney said to the husband, let's just guardianize her. Now she can't hire an attorney to defend her or to put for her rights in this divorce. And judges are allowing it to happen. And they take campaign contributions from many of the people that they then appoint to these lucrative positions. To me, that's just unethical. Now, you know, I had a lot of family members tell me, and again, since 2015, I've been doing this research, that they thought the judge was on the take. Well, in the secretive world of guardianship and conservatorships, cases are sealed, lots of gag orders. I was not able to confirm any of that. Honestly, to me, most of the judges that I studied were just part of a detached, cold assembly line procedure where they just wanted to ram through the cases and make sure that their court appointees were happy and employed. Now, maybe some were on the take, but I couldn't prove it. In the book, I outline lots of judges' misconduct, in my opinion. One of them was Judge David Cowan right there in Los Angeles. Lisa, you know him.
I sure do.
As I
got a David Cowan story too.
I bet you do. I think I know what it is. David Cowan, to me, it became clear he was more of a control freak than someone worried about wards. In Palm Beach County, Florida, I looked into a lot of a guy named Judge Martin Collin. Now, this guy's wife was a tennis pro, and he decided she should become a guardian. And then he convinced all of his legal colleagues to recommend get her hired on these lucrative guardianship cases. She made a lot of money, and reportedly it helped finance the judge's gambling habits. So take it from there. Look, you know, some guardianships work out well. They really do. And some are needed. And they work out when trusted, loving family members are appointed as the guardian. But I found an astounding number of cases where judges just overlooked the family members. They didn't even want to hear from them. And instead, they appointed these for-profit appointees, the conservatives, the guardians, the trustees, and some of them charge $600 an hour or even more. It was just astounding to me. And as William said, I found a lot of cases nationwide, physical, emotional, certainly financial, psychological, and sexual abuse cases nationwide. So many that they just scream for attention to be paid, for reforms to be passed in these states, and for the truly guilty to be fully prosecuted. I am tired of hearing that police law enforcement said, well, you know, we don't do civil cases, we only do criminal cases. A judge has ruled we can't do anything. Malarkey, to quote our president, malarkey. And I'm tired of prosecutors bringing these 20, 30 count indictments and then settling for a plea bargain agreement where they give the perp a slap on the wrist. This is aiding and abetting the predators, in my opinion. Look, I'm going to wrap it up, but I just want you to know my book includes tips on how people can protect themselves and the people they love. And I also talk about reforms that laws that states have passed. But frankly, I believe that most of them are Band-Aid reforms, Band-Aids on this system that is a gaping, bleeding wound. Why would you put a Band-Aid on it? In my opinion, I think this whole system needs to be completely overhauled with an eye toward those who really need guardianship, as opposed to people who could get into an alternative program. I write a lot about supported decision-making programs, for example. I just think that as it stands now, it is way too easy for somebody to suddenly become caught up in a guardianship or a conservatorship, and they aren't even incapacitated, and they have a family that loves them and wants to take care of them, and the judges are going for the people with dollar signs in their eyes instead. It's time for this to stop. Okay, my time is up, I'm sure. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. So we'll all look forward to buying Diane's book. It will be released, is that October?
Yeah, it's online. If you want to pre-order it, it's online.
All right. Thank you so much for spending part of your afternoon with us. We do appreciate you very much and all the hard work that went in to writing this book, because I know it was a labor of love for you. All right. Now we're going to the beautiful Carrie Case. Carrie, are you here, hon?
I'm here. Can you see me?
I certainly can. So Carrie became an advocate, as she'll tell you, a few years ago, and I'm going to surprise, and I'm sorry, in 2014, when her father was the subject of a very much publicized, controversial conservatorship, and not surprisingly, Sam Ingham was the court-appointed attorney. But to give you an idea of who this very feisty, lovely lady is, if this works, I have a very brief video. Can I share?
Yes.
You telling the lawyer the way it is. So this is Carrie in a deposition, stating as it is, taking no prisoners.
Watch this, guys.
Guardianship work?
I read a lot of things.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you verbatim
Okay.
what I read. Can I finish? Why? Because you asked me a question. I want to finish
Sure,
my
go
answer. Okay. So after he does that, he then withdraws the petition. And a little while later, he has Susan sign, and this is what I think it is, a 66-page will and estate plan that changes everything. And yet he's called this woman incompetent, unable to understand. She's had 4 strokes. I think she's blind in one eye, not a very high education. And she's signing away something after he's told the court that she's completely incompetent. I've been an elder abuse, anti-elder abuse advocate for 4 years now. I have congressional recognition. I have seen cookie cutter predators, and your client is one of them.
Ooh.
Ooh.
So good. Look at that face. I love it. So,
Yeah.
Carrie, I'm going to ask you a little bit of a call to action. Tell us what you think needs to be done to stop the aiding and abetting of elder abuse.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank everybody who's joined, us today. There's so many of you that I know, so many of you that I've helped. somebody who just lost their mom. And I appreciate all of you wanting to help, listening to us at this whole panel. I'm so honored to be with every single one of you who have spent years fighting this epidemic, this elder abuse epidemic. And Lisa, thank you. It's World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, which is June 15th. And when I realized a month after my father died, I was Googling, I don't know why, I don't know what compelled me to do so, but I Googled June 15th and it came up as the UN, it had been for the past few years, the UN had designated June 15th as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. My dad died on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day and Father's Day of that year. And if that's not a sign to say, keep going, you know, keep strong, I don't know what is. So I have to tell you that it's been an honor to work with you all and to be here today on this day with you all. But there's so many things that have been brought up already that I'm not going to go over again or into, but you know, like Diane said, the judges, that is the problem. It doesn't matter how many laws we pass. If the judges are not going to adhere to them, why are we spending all this time? There is no consequences for when they don't adhere to the law. And when they are making horrific decisions that are destroying families. In my case, thank God, I know I had some guardian angels watching over our family, because Sam Ingham actually did the right thing in my case, and that was telling the judge that my father wanted to see us kids, wanted us to make decisions on his behalf, and I ended up actually winning guardianship / conservatorship over my father. And unfortunately, it didn't end in a trial like I wanted it to, but I did do an entire podcast over a year ago called Bitter Blood, Kasem versus Kasem, and you can listen to this anywhere now. It was just on Audible, now it's free on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and it tells the whole story. It gives all the depositions like that one, but that deposition that I took was against a lawyer, a predatory attorney that had destroyed 5 families. I'm not going to say where or what, but he tried to sue me for defamation. I had enough evidence against this man that when I walked in for my deposition, I had all the evidence there. I gave it all. The judge, after seeing the deposition, dropped the case. So, you know, it's like they try and bully, they try and do everything. When the lion roars, the louder they roar, they know that you are getting to them. You are so close to getting justice, and they will roar as loud, and they will scare you, and they will bully you, and they will sue you. Keep going. Keep going. If the truth is on your side, keep going. And that's what I did. And I 3 times I've been threatened, and people have gone after me, and I've won. But you know, there's so many, I was writing down so many different things that people were saying. The one thing I really want to say is keep going to your representatives, making phone calls. If it's once a week, if it's once a month, telling them this needs to change, telling them that, you know, this is an epidemic and we're all going to get old and we can all end up there. Even the representatives, you know, this is not, you know, this can affect anybody and everybody, no matter what your social status is, right? So, you know, Mr. Lightfoot was talking about, you know, all these different criminal activities of just leaving seniors and just leaving them there, like Phyllis. My dad was left at several different hospitals during the year I was fighting for him. Several different hospitals. There was one he was left at for 2 weeks. He was dropped off, or wasn't feeling well, had a little cough. And I got, when I got my dad's medical records, it was for 2 weeks. Can't get a hold of wife, can't get a hold of wife, can't get a hold of wife, can't get a hold of, called APS, can't get a hold of wife, called APS, twice APS was called on her. And all these different criminal acts, like my father being declared incompetent, yet his will was changed after that, his will and estate plans were changed. There were so many different criminal acts that took place, not one person wanted to help, and it was all, I was all told it was civil. Right? Yeah. So, you know, for me, we need to come together. We need to get a hold of our representatives, constantly call them, constantly. I don't care if it bothers them, but we need people doing this. And we need to hold the judges accountable for what, you know, they are doing. And I believe it's, I call it a crime ring. And you know, Diane hasn't found any evidence of money being given to these judges. But if you watch The Guardians, you can see what this guy is clearly doing when he clears a courtroom because a guardian tells him to, and listens to the guardian, you know.
Yeah.
But you had some questions, Lisa?
No, I'm absolutely 100% on, you're at 100% on point. Also, I've never been given any evidence of outright graft, but maybe it's campaign contributions.
Right.
It is remarkable, though, the lack of training. Again, no supervision, nobody's auditing. They got away with what they did to Brittany for 13 years because the judge took the file to a different courthouse and it was sealed. The whole thing was sealed for all those years. It's just absolutely remarkable. That should never, ever, ever happen to anyone again.
Yeah.
Yes.
And absolutely. And I mean, I'm going to continue working. I'm going to continue working on bills. I'm working with some advocates right now, Angelique Fawcett, who tried to help Nichelle Nichols. There's, people who are that were working on the Brittany, the Free Brittany. We've come together trying to get another bill done, but it seems like nothing is getting done at the federal level, which needs to happen. There needs to be a massive bill dealing with guardianship and conservatorship abuse. It doesn't seem to be getting passed. I know Rick Black has gotten things done, but like Diane said, a lot of these are band-aids. And in a lot of like the bills that I've passed, the 12 that I did with my Case and Cares team, and the other 9 states that adopted a version of the Case and Cares bill, they are band-aids. And sometimes people I've gotten letters where they say, thank God for your bill, I got to see my mom or dad. Many of them, it didn't help. I did my best, but it is a band-aid for what we need to do. And that's destroy, take down.
Overhaul the system.
We got a bill, I helped work on a bill to get the police training on these elder abuse cases. And the governor signed it, it passed the whole thing, but they don't fund it, Oh, what's that? I don't know. We don't have any money to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carrie. So
Very welcome.
I actually agree. I think the key to this is getting everybody in a room and train and supervision, accountability, auditing files, doing those random audits so that you're seeing, and if there's a complaint about a guardianship, what I loved about Nevada is they set up a compliance department. You don't have to go through an appeal. You can go directly to a department that is supervising these courts. There's too much money, too much cronyism, too many laws being ignored, and people are suffering. It's called injustice. Our next speaker, because we actually are moving rather slowly, but it's been a wonderful presentation, Dr. Toby Davidow. Am I saying that right?
Very close, Davidow, but I'll take it.
Yeah, and she's a professor in the Washington, DC area. And tell us what you experienced and what you are suggesting for us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. So today, June 15, 2023, marks the 17th year that the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse and the United Nations World Health Organization launched the first World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. 17 years of ongoing awareness and 17 years of only slightly moving the proverbial needle to begin controlling this worldwide epidemic. If there is any silver lining, it has been that much more awareness has been generated on the hidden abuse that seniors and other vulnerable adults endure on a daily basis. From stories that have been shared on this webinar alone, it is evident that elder abuse does not discriminate, and it is rampant in the United States. My remarks will be geared mainly to the helpful professionals who are seeking to understand more about elder abuse's ripple effects and who are able and willing to push the envelope for reform in their company or agency within their states and federally. Before diving in, I first want to provide quick context of our senior population. We are living in a time affectionately called the silver tsunami, which embraces every single natural gray hair of the largest living adult generation known as the baby boomers. Baby boomers make up almost 80 million individuals aged 59 to 77 who have collectively accumulated wealth, raised families, and have worked hard They are now retiring and facing medical challenges. These same group of unsuspecting people have become prime targets of scams and other unscrupulous practices. As Diane Diamond mentioned, it is not uncommon for crafty perpetrators to troll overflow hospital hallways, rehab centers, nursing homes, or even in a family home where the senior occupants are living a solitary lifestyle. It's anyone who looks like they can use a friend or simply be convinced they need one. And these perpetrators take the time to get to know their victims until they convince their victim that life is meaning without the perpetrator in their life. And with simple, non-eyebrow raising weapons of choice, including smoke and mirrors, some drugs, and a ballpoint pen to induce a mix of coercion and manipulation, people are signing away their assets and their rights. There is even a rallying cry of advocates to address this pattern of abuse. Isolate, medicate, take the estate. Look closely at enough cases, you will find it happens every single time where the victim is heavily medicated, isolated from their family, and left without significant assets by the time they pass away. The Netflix movie I Care a Lot actually perfectly portrays this concept in the first half of the movie. But sadly, it's not complete Hollywood made-up fiction. It's real life, and there are hardly any laws to stop this madness. Let's play out one type of scenario to understand the impact on the loved one of a senior. For weeks, an immediate senior family member excitedly tells you about a new best friend. Tangentially, you observe that your family member's personality is changing. They stop returning phone calls and complain their money is dwindling. You notice new medications strewn around the house when you visit, and they repeatedly change their ironclad estate plans, replacing you with their new best friend. They get angry when you try to discuss your concerns. You are not allowed to communicate with them. Meanwhile, the friend claims there's nothing wrong. So what do? An average person might say, well, something is not right, especially with this new friend. I have a right to interact with my family. All I need to do is show a birth certificate to the proper authorities of how I'm related, or become a squatter in my loved one's home, and everything magically resolves itself. Just because you have proof of how you are connected to your loved one does not forge a path to justice. Neither you nor your loved one have many rights to see each other unless a court document certifies as such. And getting a court to certify that can take years and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the right person may not even prevail. So where do people turn? Sympathetic police units will do welfare checks, but are more looking for signs of life. Retaining an attorney is also standard practice. Many people will seek out an elder law attorney, thinking they are well-versed on elder abuse laws. Unfortunately, with not many state laws to stand on and few lecture hours being devoted to guardianships and conservatorships, many lawyers spend hours trying to put a round peg through a square hole. When police and lawyers do not offer relief, some people call county and state services, such as prosecutor offices and adult protective services. And these entities are hit and miss and depend on variables such as staffing and training, budget, and mission of the unit. There are a handful of states that have senior and vulnerable adult welfare laws, and some do thanks in part of the good work of Kerry and Kasem Cares. Unfortunately, even if a state has elder abuse laws, they are often watered down and they are not enforced. I can count on one hand how many times I've read a person has served jail time or paid back the assets they stole after being convicted of an elder abuse crime. And this all goes without saying that being convicted of an elder abuse crime is a rarity in itself.
Yeah.
This surreal circumstances coupled with no relief leaves people mourning the loved one's relationship and angry that no one can make it right. It's an impossible situation. Many investigative entities historically look for physical signs of abuse, not the emotional side like manipulation, coercion, and fraud, as the softer side of evidence is more challenging to obtain. Getting involved in what was called family squabbles is usually not the role that any authority wants to take on. So they either investigate something more tangible and less messy, or just simply appoint the guardian. And even if some evidence is collected, there's no guarantee it will be honored in a courtroom. So a question to reflect on to all that is working on these issues. How actively do you seek and identify patterns of undue influence in victims? I bet the number is pretty small. And one important point that cannot be understated, the number one question an attorney will ask before taking on an elder abuse case is, what is your loved one's capacity level? The answer to this question then sets up a direction for the lawyer to proceed with a case based on clinical evaluations. Regardless of this answer, this question only further victimizes the victim, with either their diagnosis continuously used against them or being subjected to evaluation after reevaluation for their mental health. Rather, a higher level of measurement should be evaluating the level of empathy that the accused has shown the victim. For example, Dr. Stanton Samenow postulated in 2020 that narcissists' continuing manipulation and exploitation, sense of entitlement, unreasonable expectations, and lack of sensitivity always results in another person's emotional injury. Wouldn't it be great to be able to prosecute on these grounds instead of a victim's capacity level? Educational reform on elder abuse awareness is desperately needed in this country. This translates to amended continuing education for attorneys, introduction of guardianship curriculum to law students, better training for both law enforcement and medical field professions, and convincing politicians of the epidemic proportions that elder and vulnerable abuse has in the majority of the United States. Together, we can work on making stronger laws and hold perpetrators more accountable. Since this is a solution-based panel, here's my call to action for all helping professionals. Take the time to learn about actual elder abuse and vulnerable adult laws that exist in states where you practice or serve. You may find there are actually very few. Get to know of the 7 types of elder abuse signs, which are the ones that William Lightfoot alluded to earlier. Educate the public on what to do if elder abuse happens to them. Most of the internet information on elder abuse is preventative, leading people to think, oh, well, this is great, but it will never happen to me. But once it does happen to them, there are hardly any guiding resources for next steps, and that makes it hard. Advocate for tougher elder abuse laws. Investigate all sides of claims, not just the alleged victim side, and call on any of us advocates if we can be helpful. It takes a village of people who are not only aware, but have the ability to provide relief to victims. On behalf of the advocates and victims who are supporting this webinar, I thank you for stepping up to make a difference.
Wow.
I want to applaud.
Yeah, I know.
I know. We feel the same way. Thank you, Toby. I mean, wow, exactly right. Spot on. So we'll just reproduce your lecture and we'll put it all over the internet because it was brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And it's been lovely meeting you too. I mean, it's just been such a pleasure getting to know you. And I hope we get to spend more time together in the future, developing a proper curriculum for attorneys and judges and other people so that we recognize that, for example, if you get a call that someone is in handcuffs, talk to the person that has the photographs.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, at least make it a learning lesson. Exactly. So without further ado, and I know we're running over time, but we have such a great panel here. Rick Black, a friend, a mentor, an advocate, zealously fighting for people, taking the phone calls, listening. I don't know how we ever deserved a wonderful person like Rick Black to be part of our lives. Truly, when you are hurt and really in the right place, you will want to stop people from hurting. And Rick exemplifies everything about what we need in a citizen, you know, as for all of us should be advocating to protect others. So Rick, I'm going to let go of my screen share. I think I'm going to end screen share. And then, if you're ready, I'll let you take over as boss.
Yeah, and thanks for that wonderful introduction.
Well, we love you so much. We really do.
Well,
Rick.
it's mutual. This says that host disabled participant screen sharing. Did you activate it?
Panelist. So let me. See, now it's not letting me do anything the way I used to be able to do it. So panelists,
Well, I'll tell you what, let me just go through this so that we don't take more time trying to get it active, because I can certainly read through it and get us back on track, at least for,
there you go. You should,
I'm live.
yes. And what I'm saying is that you should be able to screen share now.
Ah, there we go.
You got it, Rick?
I do.
Okay.
Ah,
There
Can
you go.
you see what we got here?
Yes, got it.
Okay,
Wow,
let's,
did
let's-
it. Boomers and technology.
yeah, I gotta,
There you go.
next time I gotta make sure I just send you my slides, Lisa, and then you can add it to your deck. So my apologies for all the confusion. My wife and I started SEER back in 2018, the Center for State Administration Reform. We advocate for victims 7 days a week. We've investigated or counseled over 5,000 cases since we started our work back in 2013 in Las Vegas. What we need to understand is we are under attack. We, good Americans, good families with vulnerable children, parents, siblings, spouses in many cases, are being targeted for our wealth. Today, roughly $2 trillion a year passes generationally in the US. And that makes us a target by the predatory legal community, as well as other nefarious characters who understand the ease by which they can exploit the vulnerable in our country. There's also $1 trillion a year of federal funds that flow into each state in Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid funding to support the disabled, the injured and sick, and the destitute as well. So we've got a country of extreme wealth, $3 trillion in play every year that nefarious actors can attach themselves to. And the one point that we're talking about today on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day is what happens when predatory attorneys take advantage of judges with poor judgment to exploit through the courts. SEER has been working on legislative reform since 2015. Our work started in Nevada, where we made some revolutionary changes that today have not been repeated in Nevada, that today have not been repeated in any other state nationwide. That effort started with an existing platform of transparency in the state of Nevada at that time. All hearings were video recorded. All records were digitally accessible to the public. And those two platform bases are not duplicated in any other state today. We have some that make records digitally available, but not all records. We have some states that video record some hearings, but not all hearings, and routinely run hearings in chamber, which puts these proceedings in secrecy. So transparency is number one. The best in class state to this day is Nevada on that front. Number two, which really changed the horizon in Nevada, was third-party free respondent counsel. And that has been fought nationwide as we've attempted to transfer and translate that model to any other state. And specifically, because you'll hear attorneys now talk about respondent counsel, we need respondent counsel. In a guardianship proceeding, the respondent is the person being targeted for guardianship. We don't like using alleged incapacitated person, just like we don't like hearing alleged criminal. You're innocent until proven guilty, and you're perfectly sane until appropriate people evaluate you and an order for guardianship is created. But you are the respondent. Introducing attorneys who've been trained in civil rights ADA rights and guardianship law in each state, and that are paid for by state and federal funds to provide that defense as respondent counsel is a critical component to evening the playing field in these proceedings. The last one critical is exit ramps. What we see nationwide is contested guardianships go on for years, often more than a decade, at a cost of hundreds of thousands and often $1 million to the victim and their loved ones. No state has adopted a system that allows you to go to a jury trial that takes it all the way back to the beginning, back to the point that Lisa was talking about on the Britney Spears case, to really get an understanding of how she was exploited for 13 years. You have to go back to the Dr. Spar non-existent evaluation that was leveraged through the entire proceeding. And that we call that de novo, go back to the beginning. No state has adopted an exit ramp that allows you to go before a jury and allows you to go back and look at the very beginnings of a case. This year, we had a positive movement in New Mexico with the leadership of Sherry Lund and a team of New Arizonans. My apologies. I say New Mexico there, but it was actually Arizona with Senate Bill 1291. It's gone through the Senate. It is now before the House. We expect, and it's being amended. We expect it to be approved this year and hopefully put before the governor to be put into signature. But it will be an advent of jury trials for contested cases in the state of Arizona. In Florida, we got a sponsor in the House on HB 297. And unfortunately, because one of our influence that we got what we wanted introduced in the wording of the bill, the representative, Mike Caruso, came under so much pressure by fellow legislators, attorneys, and judges that 10 days after the introduction, he pulled it because he said he wouldn't survive in office if he kept pushing it. So I say that because I want everyone to understand we are under attack. This attack is being led by predatory attorneys who make a living within our equity court system, whether it's called probate or orphans court or family court. These are attorneys that don't care about you, don't care about your loved one. They only care about how they can weaponize these courts to fatten their wallets. Point is, we own the solutions. And as has been said by many of the others, we have to get access to our federal and state leaders working in cooperation with other activists so that we get our agenda elevated and get our voices to be heard above the false narrative that comes from leadership of the bar in each state that this system works perfectly well. And the issue is those problem family members, as we've all heard. But this is the platform that we drive from within SEER. We can look across many states, New York, Connecticut, certainly Florida, Texas, California. The current system has its own unique shortcomings. But if we work off this platform, we do see a way to reduce the victimization. This year, we had a hearing in March with the U.S. Senate Special Committee on Aging. Many of you on the webinar were there, as my wife and I were, in Washington, D.C. to participate in this hearing. It was encouraging, some of the discussion, but it was also clear by the two bills that were launched that day, Senate Bill 1126 by Mike Braun, the minority ranking member of the committee out of Indiana, and Senator Bob Casey, the majority leader, Senate Bill 1148. What it showed was either their reluctance to really tackle this issue from a federal perspective or their lack of knowledge of the issue. They nibbled around the edges with these two bills. I'm not going to go through them all, but what was encouraging to me is we did get new bills introduced. It gives us a platform to open up dialogue with these two senators and their staffers. And we've been busily working with them and have meetings planned in late June with some parallel organizations that are working with the Department of Justice and the Department of Health and Human Services to put more meat on the bones of these two bills, and hopefully before the end of the current Congress, come out with a combined bill that will truly address some of the root cause issues that we're seeing nationwide. The issue, federal authorities continue to wring their hands on this issue. We've got to get a lot more active in Washington, D.C. if we're going to make a difference. So reality is these frauds are growing. Adult guardianship, conservatorship frauds are growing at the county level, at the state level. State leadership is ignoring the core issues. This is about judges with poor judgment and predatory litigators who take full advantage of it. Terry talked about the lawsuit that she's involved in. My wife and I and Sear were sued for defamation by a Florida attorney in February, and he's ramped up with new counsel, and it's clear he's looking for a fight to make sure that Sear and its sponsors are silenced. While we adopt a policy of always telling the truth and making sure that we have material evidence to support our claims, understand anyone can be sued at any time for anything, and lawyers know that better than anyone. So you got to protect yourself, but understand we're in this. This is the fight of our lives and future generations of Americans. So let's continue to organize. Let's continue to work cooperatively. We got a lot of work ahead of us to reduce the victimization, and thanks everyone for participating today.
Wow, thank you so much, panel. Thank you, Rick. It's been a pleasure spending about 90 minutes with you. We went over, and I'm willing to stay on a little bit if there are other questions. I'm sorry we can't answer all questions, but this is the end of our webinar, and we look forward to seeing you again at some point. So I'm just going to take a look, see if there's any other questions. Some people are asking questions about particulars of their circumstances. And so for people like, I can only really help in California. Rick, we've got some people listening that want to know, should they reach out to you? How should they approach their
by all means, we don't give legal advice. I'm not an attorney. We give practical advice to anyone who calls based on the plethora of experience that we have. We are actually on vacation out here in Northern Canada. So let me get back to the office later this month and get in touch with us, and we'll do what we can to try to help you through the issues that you're facing, all the questions that have come in.
Right. I mean, one of the things that I'm going to be doing is hopefully developing a curriculum and separating judges and lawyers so that the lawyers are trained to think in terms of due process, the proper approach to representing a person in California facing conservatorship, and then also trying to get the judges out of it, because this system of protecting favorites or appointing favorites, to me, really in California and LA County, well, you see what it did to Britney Spears.
It's nationwide though, Lisa.
Nationwide,
That's what it is.
it's cronyism. I mean, it's just hideous to see it. And honestly, I'm doing this because I am so sick and tired of people calling me, explaining the abuse that is going on. And when I hear it's an undue influence or brainwashing, or the recent spouse doesn't let somebody see the children anymore, and it breaks my heart to say, chances are I'm not going to be able to help you. The court is going to listen to the court-appointed attorney who's going to be the zealous advocate for your incapacitated parent, and your incapacitated parent is being unduly influenced. So essentially, the court-appointed attorney becomes the advocate for the undue influencer, the guy that and aiding and abetting everything that's wrong. I mean, some of these things just are ridiculous in terms of what we're watching with the dependence of the judges on court-appointed counsel and these ridiculous reports that they're writing. So I'm gonna be working to mitigate that, see if we can develop a program separating judges and lawyers and money. And perhaps I'll see you guys in the future. So I think that
Lisa, if
Yes.
anyone has any questions about identifying elder abuse, I'll be glad to talk to them.
okay, yes. So all of us are accessible. I would say Rick has the phone lines open with any questions. And of course, Lisa McCarley at gmail.com. I'm on Twitter. I've never said this before, but you can like and follow. I don't normally promote social media, but I am very much interested in engaging. And so with this, we've been on for an hour and a half. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for being with us. And I think this concludes our webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.